My name is Seth Cohen, and I'm the Chief Impact Officer of Forbes and the founder of the Forbes Impact Lab. I'm here today in the NASDAQ market site in New York City, and I'm joined by Hall of Fame quarterback, Super Bowl winner, and investor, Steve Young. Steve, thanks for joining me today.
Seth, my pleasure to be here.
So Steve, there's so many different kinds of conversations we can have with each other. We can talk about sports, we can talk about investing, we can talk about faith. I'd like to do all three.
I think you can't help but do all three at once.
Exactly, because they all go together in a lot of ways.
Of course they do.
But let's start, with your why. People have so many different views of you, again, from being a star on the field, to being a successful businessman, to being a best-selling author. What motivates you? Who is Steve Young and what keeps him going?
Kind of the root. I guess you're asking a rooted question, right? What's the root? If you go to the root for me, and I guess you go to the root of my theology, is that there's God, Mother, Father. We all lived with them before. Our durable spirits that's inside of us, in each human being. Mm-hmm. We're with God before, and we're actually of God. We're divine. Every human being is divine in its nature, in its root. And then we all made this raw, fundamental, full of agency and rigor choice to take a body. Mm-hmm. So in that way, so if I just lay that out as that we're all then that kind of, in my mind, that's my roots. Mm-hmm. That's my roots of how you and I are here and how I see you. I see you as divine. Mm-hmm. I see you as a part of the family, that we're in it together. And I think that my why in faith is because I think that's my truth. Mm. And because that's my truth, then I got to go. Like anything, if it's not your truth, it's not your truth if you don't live it.
So,
right?
So you live this truth in lots of different ways. But let's now go backwards to you had to live in many ways through a life of resilience, through effort, through faith, in front of millions and millions of eyeballs on the football field. What was that like? And maybe explain to me how does one navigate kind of that inner self while also being incredibly public, like you have had to be over a lot of your career?
I've always enjoyed, my dad used to say to me, "You love 3rd and 10." And if you love football, you'll know 3rd and 10 is not a fun place to be.
That's the
right?
long.
That's 3rd and long, right? He goes, and I go, "Dad, no, I don't love 3rd and 10. I just find it a lot." And I think that I enjoy, going to law school while I play football. I love the conversations being different and changing. I love learning about, and so to me, doing something very public and then still having such, I'm more of an introvert generally. Mm-hmm. If you leave me alone, I'll be on the outskirts of the party and listening rather than be in the middle of it all. And so I think I love what I'll call the emotional athleticism of life. Mm. I love, two different things that are very, and then finding that, synergy or the abundance in it. And so for me, playing in front of millions of people and then having, I don't know exactly what the question that you were asking, but I find the challenges and the rigors of life. Like, I guess fundamentally, again, we go back to the roots. I believe we're all here as human beings to learn and grow. That's what we're here to do. And so I'm up for that.
So we have conversations a lot these days about how faith, about how beliefs are not necessarily a place you can bring into the workplace. That's not the case in a locker room. In a locker room,
it's all there.
It's all there. Talk to me a little bit about the unifying space of a football. And you were sharing with me an anecdote before of one of your coach, Bill Walsh, and how he handled this.
So he was obviously he was the Hall of Fame coach, won Super Bowls, and he'd start every season, bring the team together and say, "Look, I don't care what play we run. I don't care what defense we run. We're going to win because we have shared common experiences and an element of love for each other." Mm-hmm. And that was mind-bending for a football coach to say that. Like, what? I don't know what you're talking, and then he went out and enacted it. Like he knew that if we played together in a locker room setting for 10 years, we would know each other's name because it's on the back of their jersey, but we wouldn't really, quarterbacks would know each other. Offensive players might know each other, but the defensive players, I might know your name, but I don't really know you.
Right.
And he said, that's where we lose. And if we're going to play great winning football, the 49ers for 20 years were in the playoffs, 5 Super Bowls, I want to guess 12 championship games. People are like, wow, how did they do it? He did it off of relationships. And so that taught me fundamentally, it was always intuitively true to me, but then if it's true on the football field, then it must be true in business. It must be true, and it must be super true at home, right? And so so for how I navigated the locker room with my faith was being very vulnerable, self-deprecating, and have a sense of humor. Some of my best friends on the team, Harris Barton and John Frank, were Jewish. They were my roommates. And there's you can imagine the conversations and the fun we had, and we just laughed about the unique, crazy things about our faith. If somebody wanted to have a conversation with me on the plane, great. And if they wanted, and I tried never to be offended. I tried to always find the space where we were in it together.
Being accessible.
Yes, and so and laugh at some of the oddities.
Yeah. But that's teamwork. It sounds like, and that's also a way that an individual leader shows up and brings himself or herself into that space and creates that accessibility. But to go backwards, just even a little bit more. I mean, when people look at you, they see championships, they see MVPs, but you've also had to be resilient. They don't remember necessarily the early Steve Young that had to fight through everything just to get to that stage through college into pros. How has resilience shaped Steve Young?
I mean, all the things you said that are positive have been built off of losses and failure. How many times have I wanted to quit? Luckily, my dad, again, back to my dad, he's like, you can't quit. You can play it out, you can figure out something else to do in your life, but you can't quit. And so luckily I had people around me that didn't let me quit, because I would have quit. So as you talk about resilience, I don't know that I'm that resilient. Luckily I had some people around me at very vulnerable times that would gave me some resilience. So I'm not going to claim I'm the toughest bastard you ever seen in your life. You never seen it. I kind of grew into that over time, kind of learned as I kind of fake it till you make it. But I think I started to realize, again, back to my roots, if I'm here to learn and grow, if that's what I'm here for, then the challenges are the life force. It's the things that are hard things are actually the food for learning and growing.
That's
right?
the mission we're on.
Right. So then why would I run away from it? And so I got this theme in my mind, maybe about college time, when I run into about 40 things that were really hard, that I noticed that I started to go around them. You know what I mean? And I built calluses of going around them. And if you do that over time, you never actually...
Yeah, you got to go through it.
You got to go through it. But you have to affirmatively go through it. You have to, if you're pushed in there, you'll find another way around. You have to actually make the statement to yourself, this is hard, and I'm going through it.
So translate what you just described to now we're in a generation very much that is in the moment, where what they do on the field successfully, what maybe they do in business successfully is immediately tweeted, immediately Instagram. They can't suffer in silence because they have to be on all the time. Right. What advice do you have for maybe this generation of both athletes and just leaders of how to respond in that moment?
So my friend Ronnie Lott, who is a Hall of Fame defensive back for the 49ers for many years, and he got into a beef with a famous quarterback that I won't name because it's local, and and got onto it in the field, and they got into each other and Ronnie he was an incredible competitor, but he wasn't on the field. The field was sacred ground to him, and so to have him get into a beef is like, what happened? And I remember asking him. He goes, he doesn't understand. that competition is sacred, and if you don't respect it, if you disrespect it, if you say something that disrespects, or you make some fun of someone who's lost, or you make some fun, then you've taken away. How do you say it? If I'm playing just to win and lose, I don't want to do it. I want to grow. I want to learn. If I'm going to lose, I want to learn. Don't you shame me from learning.
The purpose. I love what you just said. Competition is sacred.
Sacred. And so in other words, think about it. Competition at its core is just winners and losers.
Right.
And if we all live at the bottom of the hill as a winner and loser, well, I'm a winner, I'm a loser. If that's all it is, according to Ronnie Lott, that's not worth it. I don't want to do it.
So you've had another chapter in your career since you've retired from football, where you've been phenomenally successful as an investor, but also as someone who assesses the landscape of investment and opportunities. What have you learned both about resilience and maybe even again bringing back in faith to being a successful investor and entrepreneur?
Well, business is hard for me, coming from a place where there was a lined field, there's a scoreboard, there's a clock, and like everything was immediate. You had 80,000 witnesses. You couldn't come after the game and say, "Oh, it didn't happen the way you saw it." Well, no, I watched it. You can't mitigate your way out of that one. And so my life previously I loved that the end of it was a score. The end of it was the truth. And the field was the place of truth. And you come to business, it's harder to find. It's like the score is like.
Yeah, it's
like,
a lot
I'm not
more
really
ambiguous.
Sure, yeah.
Winners and losers.
Then who saw it? What's the truth? Oh, there's all this obfuscation and all this mitigation and all this. No one is actually responsible, And so I've loved kind of jumping in with entrepreneurs, founders, management teams, even other financial sponsors, people that see the world kind of how I saw it before. And can recognize that in the end, if we're really going to win, which means I'm going to win in every direction, not just me, they're businesses that are built off of these same principles.
Yeah.
And they're willing to go the extra mile, the longer way, rather than just transaction, rather than just, whatever is the thing of the day, but actually to build something that is, kind of player equity, right? It's like employee equity. What kind of a culture are we building? What kind of who owns the business? Can we spread that out? Can we
the same values and that same locker room mindset that your old coach taught you as well?
100%. If you think about in the football team, there's 50 independent contractors essentially. Like I negotiated my own contract. I'm getting paid my salary. It's different than everybody else. Quarterbacks usually way more. You go into a locker room now being one of the highest paid oddities in the locker room. Now you've got to come together, shed all of that, and come together in a way that gets tested viscerally. Like you can't speak it.
Sounds like a startup. It sounds like a startup.
You have to live it. Yeah. But yet, how can I draw those linemen who have to give their body to protect me, who are being paid a tenth of what I'm being paid, to actually want to do it? And there's that dynamic is super cool to think about in business.
Yeah.
Because those are the lessons. Applicable. And if you can pull that off and create that kind of environment of, I tell you, the way you do it is accountability. The quarterback owns, the ball's in my hands. Yeah. What's the truest truth? The ball's in my hands, and now it's in, if I throw an interception, it's in their hands. There's a lot of mitigation that happens on the field. There's so much that happens that you can find excuse in, but the truest truth is it's on me. And if you do that, you spread that out into the team, and everybody kind of you know what, I'll keep following you.
Well, Steve, I feel like there's so many topics we could cover, including investment, faith. We already talked a bit about football. We haven't yet talked about BYU's playoff chances yet. But I have one last question.
Think about this. BYU's playoff chances being led by the only Jewish quarterback in the NCAA today.
Who'd have thunk?
Seth, come on.
Who'd have thunk?
You gotta love that.
Who'd have thunk? Well, with that, I have one last question. You have a book that I've read about love, called Love. And I think in this moment that we're in as a country, we talk a lot about division. We talk about, do we know our neighbors? Yet you've written thoughtfully about how your faith, about how your beliefs create a roadmap for us to love each other despite our differences. What is maybe one piece of advice that you have from from that perspective that we can share in this moment for maybe people who are wondering, where is the love?
Yeah. Well, we're in a very transactional space right now, and transaction, like the language. You think of entropy, the scientific environment we live in. The language of entropy is transaction. That's what we live in. It's rational. What's irrational is to think about, could we find more abundance if we were able to see each other in a way that was selfless? That there's truly selfless love out there, and in that, it's not necessarily something that weakens your position. Ironically, it gives you the full measure of who you can be. And so the irony of selfless love in business, and people are like, what, Steve, what are you talking about? I go back to my 49er experience. I go back to what I learned on the field, what I've seen in business, what I see in my marriage. When I see, like, anything comes up and it's like, if I was gonna lay on top of, or I was gonna, states of being, a situation or trouble, what language would I bring to an argument, and if that language is long-suffering, gentle persuasion, meekness, and love unfeigned, if I'm gonna actually speak those words in this tough environment, tough situation, it's amazing what happens. So love is, I wrote the law, it's the law of love. It means that if there's a place of perpetuity in the universe, this is not it, but if there is, it's being governed by selfless love.